Have you ever walked into a room and felt the weight of unspoken judgment pressing down on you before a single word is spoken? That was me on the night of my birthday dinner. What had been pitched as a quiet family gathering, just my children, Catherine and James, and me, felt immediately like a calculated ambush. The moment I stepped inside the softly lit bistro, the subtle hum of conversation and the scent of roasted garlic did nothing to soothe me. I knew, in a way that only a lifetime of experience can teach, that this evening would not be about celebration. It would be about examination. Catherine, my daughter, sat poised at the table, her elegant posture belying the sharpness I had learned to recognize in her eyes. Married to James, a man whose charm masked a calculating nature, she had adopted his sense of superiority as her own. They were a pair who thrived on control, who saw life in terms of advantage and perception rather than love and empathy. From the moment I arrived, the glances exchanged between them carried a silent critique, the kind that stings worse than words. "You look different," Catherine said with a faint, rehearsed smile, her voice landing somewhere between mockery and politeness. I held my composure, sensing that she intended the comment as a barb about my age or the loneliness she assumed defined my life. James leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, eyes sharp, and added, "Mom, you've always had a unique presence. It's noticeable." His tone, layered with condescension, was intended to unsettle me. I took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the bistro fill me even as their words aimed to drain it away. I had raised Catherine with all the care and attention a mother could muster, and I had loved her fiercely, even when life tested me with divorce, grief, and the isolating quiet of widowhood. Yet here she was, echoing the judgments I had endured from strangers, convinced that my life outside their narrow view was insignificant. The table was arranged meticulously, as if the setting itself were a tool for scrutiny. Gleaming cutlery, flickering candles, and delicate china, each element reflecting the illusions they assumed were all I had. But I knew better. I had a plan, a truth hidden from them for years, a reality that would shatter the assumptions they held so arrogantly. Their laughter, their casual sneers, and their small, precise criticisms would soon collide with a reality they had never imagined. And yet I waited. I watched the ornate clock on the wall, its second hand moving with steady precision, each tick a countdown to a revelation they could never anticipate. They believed this dinner was theirs to control, a stage for my humiliation. But I knew the stage was mine, and when the doorbell rang, echoing sharply through the quiet bistro, the world they had ignored, my husband, Richard, and our twins, Emma and Lucas, would step inside, exposing a truth that would forever alter their perception of me. The bistro was quiet, almost eerily so, except for the soft clatter of silverware and the occasional hum of a distant conversation. I sat at the head of the table, trying to keep my composure as Catherine and James leaned into their familiar rhythm of subtle judgment. Their ease in this environment, their sense of entitlement, was almost tangible. Every glance they exchanged was a silent calculation. How could we remind her of her age? How could we underline the mistakes she's made? They didn't know that I had long since learned to read them as clearly as an open book. Catherine sipped her wine, her perfectly manicured hand brushing her hair back from her face. "So, Mom," she said, her voice light but edged with sharpness, "how's life been? Still quiet, I suppose." There it was, the implication that my life lacked excitement, love, or meaning. I could feel the sting of her words, but I refused to show it. I had been underestimated before, and I had learned the value of patience, of holding my own counsel until the moment was right. James leaned back in his chair, exuding that practiced charm that masked a sense of superiority. "It must be hard," he said with faux concern, "to manage everything alone. I mean, after all, you've been on your own for so long." I caught the slight smirk in his tone and imagined it growing sharper in the shadows of his mind, like a blade ready to strike. I smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement that I was listening but not yielding. "Yes, it's been a journey," I said softly. "Challenging at times but also enlightening. One learns to appreciate things most people overlook." My words hung in the air, leaving an unspoken challenge for them to decipher. They expected weakness. I offered a calm, measured strength. The table, with its gleaming plates and carefully arranged candles, seemed to reflect their assumptions perfectly. A picture of perfection masking subtle cruelty. Yet beneath that surface, I felt a quiet, almost imperceptible thrill. I had prepared for this evening. Every joke at my expense, every pointed remark had been anticipated. Their belief that I was vulnerable, isolated, and powerless was the very thing that would make the coming revelation all the more potent. Catherine laughed lightly at one of James's jokes, the sound sharp in the quiet room. I noticed the way she glanced at me afterwards, as if expecting me to flinch or falter. But I did neither. Instead, I allowed my attention to drift to the clock on the wall. Each tick brought me closer to the moment they had never imagined, a moment that would completely upend the narrative they had written for me in their minds. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm determination settle into my chest. They thought they controlled the evening, that they were free to belittle me and reinforce their version of reality. They had no idea that reality had long ago shifted beyond their perception, that the truth, quiet and steadfast, was about to walk through the door. And when it did, everything they assumed about my life would crumble in an instant. The evening progressed, and with each passing minute, the subtle barbs from Catherine and James grew sharper. Their words, carefully cloaked in faux concern or polite humor, were meant to unsettle me, to remind me that in their eyes I was diminished. Yet I felt a quiet thrill beneath the surface, a sense of anticipation I could not suppress. They believed this dinner was their stage, but I knew the curtain had yet to rise. "So, Mom," Catherine began, her tone light but laced with scrutiny, "are you still spending most of your time alone? Reading, walking, watching television?" The question was pointed, a thinly veiled attempt to paint me as pitiful. I held her gaze, my smile steady, letting the silence stretch. "Sometimes," I replied calmly, "I do spend time alone. But solitude isn't emptiness. It can be preparation, reflection, even joy." James chuckled, leaning back in his chair as if my words were some amusing anomaly. "Preparation for what, exactly? It sounds lonely." His smirk was infuriating, a reminder of the arrogance he carried so naturally. Yet beneath my measured exterior, I felt a surge of confidence. I had endured this kind of scrutiny before, and I had learned that true strength lies not in confrontation but in timing. They exchanged a glance, Catherine's eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to decode the subtle defiance in my tone. "Well," she said finally, forcing a laugh, "I guess some people find happiness in unexpected places." I nodded, letting my words hang between us like a challenge they were not yet ready to meet. The tension at the table thickened with every moment. Their mockery, intended to unsettle me, only sharpened my resolve. I could sense their impatience, the flicker of irritation as they realized I was not reacting as they expected. And then it happened. The sharp, sudden chime of the bistro's doorbell echoed through the room. Heads turned instinctively, the air charged with anticipation. I felt a calm surge of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would shift everything they believed. The door opened, and there they were. Richard, my husband, steady and composed, and our twins, Emma and Lucas, beaming with the quiet confidence of children who knew their place in the world. Catherine's lips parted in disbelief, and James's expression faltered, the carefully constructed mask of control slipping. Richard's eyes met mine across the table, a subtle nod of reassurance, and I felt the weight of years of hidden truth lift from my shoulders. Emma waved shyly, Lucas tugged at Richard's sleeve, and suddenly the room was no longer theirs to command. Their assumptions, their cruel little games, were about to collide with a reality they had never imagined. Our family, fully intact, fully present, and unapologetically alive. I leaned back, allowing the silence to stretch, savoring the moment. The mockery, the sneers, the carefully timed insults, all of it had led to this. And now, the story they thought they understood was about to be rewritten in the most undeniable way. The silence that followed their entrance was electric. Catherine's eyes widened, disbelief flickering across her face. James's confident composure wavered. The carefully cultivated air of control he relied on was cracking under the weight of reality. My husband, Richard, stood tall and calm, exuding a quiet authority that needed no assertion, and the twins, Emma and Lucas, looked at the room as if to say, without words, we are here and we exist. I took a slow breath, savoring the moment I had waited for all these years. "You've spent this evening assuming you understood my life," I began softly, my voice carrying across the table. "You've believed that I am alone, weak, and without love. You've assumed that divorce, age, and time erased all possibility of joy. But you were wrong." Catherine stammered, her voice catching. "Mom, what, how?" I reached for Richard's hand, feeling the steady warmth of the partner I had kept close for years. "Richard and I said, letting each word fall carefully, "have shared a life that you never knew existed. We have children, Emma and Lucas, who have been the quiet center of our lives, unseen because they needed protection from judgments and assumptions you were never ready to challenge. Emma stepped forward, tugging at Richard's sleeve. "Hi, Mommy," she said innocently, her small hand waving. Lucas added, "We've been waiting for you to know us." Their words, simple yet loaded with truth, landed with undeniable weight. Catherine's hands trembled, her mouth opening and closing as if trying to capture words that would make sense of a world she had thought she understood. James remained frozen, his eyes darting between Richard, the twins, and me, searching for some flaw in the story that could restore his illusion of control. I let the room absorb the revelation fully. "For years you believed that my life was empty," I continued. "You thought my experiences, my choices, and my resilience were meaningless. But the love we've built, the family we've nurtured in secret, exists in a reality you never allowed yourself to imagine. I didn't hide it out of deceit. I protected it until the moment it could stand undeniable." Richard's voice, calm and steady, filled the quiet room. "Helen has lived more fully, loved more deeply, and raised a family more intentionally than anyone could have assumed. Tonight, the truth stands before you, and it cannot be dismissed." Catherine's eyes welled with tears, the anger and mockery dissolving into shock, shame, and awe. James swallowed hard, a colorless pallor overtaking the arrogance he had worn so comfortably. The twins, radiant in their innocence and certainty, offered a contrast to the adults' turmoil, a reminder that life, love, and truth are far more powerful than assumptions. I leaned back, feeling the tension in the room finally release. The ridicule, the doubts, the judgments, they had all been eclipsed by the undeniable presence of my hidden family. Tonight they had witnessed a truth too long concealed, a reality that no sneer or clever remark could undo. And in that moment I realized, the power of patience, resilience, and quiet love can transform even the cruelest assumptions into the most profound revelations. The evening settled into a quiet rhythm, though nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The bistro, once a stage for ridicule and subtle cruelty, had transformed into a sanctuary of truth. My husband, Richard, held my hand across the table, a reassuring warmth that reminded me of decades shared in trust and partnership. Emma and Lucas, now laughing softly and sharing stories in their natural, effortless way, had turned the room into a space alive with the reality I had quietly nurtured. Catherine sat across from me, her face flushed with a complex mixture of emotions: shock, guilt, awe, and a dawning understanding. James remained awkward and unsure, his presence more shadow than force, as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. I watched them, not with triumph, but with a calm sense of vindication, tempered by the knowledge that revelation is a delicate thing. It is never about revenge. It is about truth and the quiet justice that comes when assumptions are dismantled. I realized, as I observed my children adjusting to a new reality, that our lives are often judged by incomplete stories. People see only fragments, isolated moments, appearances, or misinterpreted choices, and leap to conclusions. I had lived long enough to know that others' assumptions are fleeting, inconsequential. What matters is the substance of life: love cultivated in secret, patience in the face of misunderstanding, resilience that outlasts mockery. Catherine reached across the table, her hands trembling slightly. "Mom, I didn't know," she said softly, her voice tinged with remorse and a quiet awe. I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "You believed what you saw, and that's human," I replied. "But now you've seen the truth. And truth, no matter how long hidden, cannot be ignored." James, still silent, finally nodded, a subtle acknowledgement that his world of assumptions had been irrevocably altered. Even he could not deny the reality of our family, the life I had quietly built, the love that existed outside his control, the children who embodied our resilience. As the evening drew to a close, the bistro lights casting a soft glow over empty glasses and flickering candles, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. Life is a tapestry woven of secrecy and revelation, of quiet endurance and sudden clarity. Some truths must wait for their time. Some victories are found in patience rather than confrontation. I had lived through years of underestimated strength, of unseen devotion, of love unacknowledged by those who assumed they knew me. And now, in this ordinary room made extraordinary by presence and honesty, the full story had finally emerged. Walking out into the night, the cool air brushing my cheeks, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life, rich with love, perseverance, and unexpected joy, was no longer hidden. The judgments, the mockery, and the assumptions that had sought to define me had fallen away, leaving only the truth of my choices and the family who embodied them. And I understood with deep clarity that life's greatest triumph is not always seen by others, but it is always known by the heart.